This is The Guardian.
Hello and welcome to The Guardian Football Weekly. Arsenal win the North London derby. It wasn't pretty, but Arteta's tough guys were imperious and completely dominated almost from start to finish. There might still be questions about a Saka-less attack, but they didn't really look in any danger, even while they were conceding the opening goal. As for Spurs, their woeful league run continues. People keep saying you don't know what you're going to get with Spurs, but increasingly, especially in the league, it feels like you do. Elsewhere, Newcastle's 9th win in a row. What a run, and Alexander Isak and Anthony Gordon might be the two form players in the league. We'll of course use our Southern media bias to try and offload Isak somewhere or other, but the Magpies are up to 4th and looking good for a Champions League finish. The David Moyes return ends in defeat to Aston Villa. Presumably Moyes knew quite how much work is needed at Goodison, but some good solid confirmation for him here. Ollie Watkins with a much needed winner, the difference between the sides. We'll do Palace's win at Leicester before being joined by the CEO of Fair Game to discuss the new regulator and whether it will ever come into force. Philippe's here to get some more big thoughts before we focus our attention on the big stuff. Get Shorty, Be Cool, Cole Palmer and John Travolta. All that plus your questions, and that's today's Guardian Football Weekly. On the panel today, Barry Glendenning, welcome.
Hi, Max.
Bonjour, ça va, Philippe Auclair?
Ça va bien, Max, et toi?
Yes, and welcome, Dan Bardell.
I thought about going bonjour, but I don't think I can pull it off. Hello.
Give it a try next time. Let's start at the Emirates. Arsenal win the North London derby 2-1. Philippe, many congratulations to you. Richly deserved, I thought.
I don't know if congratulations are in order, really, because it's become a bit of a routine. Yes, congratulations. It was a much needed win after what happened, both in the Carabao Cup and the FA Cup. A much improved performance from Arsenal, especially to start the game with. They were up for it, good press, a lot of enthusiasm despite the absences, but still some glaring problems within Arsenal. I was absolutely amazed. I looked at the XG. I don't do that very often. And I thought Arsenal might be something about 12. In fact, it's only 1.42 to
really?
Spurs 0.83. So, which means I'll have to go back and try to understand again how XGs are calculated, because it felt like Arsenal had chance after chance after chance after chance and carried on inventing new ways of missing them. And you thought, this might just play in Spurs' hands. And but in the end, yes, you're quite right. I mean, this Spurs side is odd. I'm not absolutely sure it has a midfield. It's got a one-man midfield, and that's about it. As ever, it showed some interesting things from time to time going forward, less than in the beginning of the season. But Arsenal didn't have to do an extraordinary amount, to win that game, even if the last few minutes were a little bit hairy. But to be honest, like when I say a routine win, this is not very flattering for Spurs, but I'm afraid that's what it was, Max. I'm sorry to rub salt in your gaping wounds.
That's okay.
And watching you squirm.
No, I'm not squirming at all. I found it deeply unsurprising the whole evening. Baz, Arteta's built such a strong defence, right? First time I'd really watched Miles Lewis-Skelly. He is some player, isn't he?
Yeah, he's just a kid. This is his breakout season. He played really, really well last night. It's a massive game for kid like him, for anyone in the Arsenal Tottenham team, although it didn't really feel like a derby. It wasn't that toxic atmosphere or no nastiness or bite on the pitch. It didn't strike me that the players really dislike each other, but I thought he was really good. He had a couple of great blocks, some brilliant tackles, good going forward. Did he win the corner?
No one won the corner really, but we'll get to that.
Oh yeah, sorry, no one won. Really good going forward and hugely impressive. And for an Arsenal team that has lost players to injury and is not having good luck with injuries, his emergence alongside that of Ethan Munari this season is something to put a spring in the Arsenal step.
Yeah, absolutely. Afterwards, Ian Wright was interviewing, or mainly just showering him with love in a way that Ian Wright can do that makes you love the situation, even if your rivals have just beaten you. And Lewis Skelly said his mum, his friends, and his grandma were there, and he had to put in the tackles because he said, "I can't look soft in front of grandma." It was a really sweet moment. But I don't know about you, Dan. I just watching that game, I just thought Arsenal looked physically so much stronger. Like I felt like they won every single 50-50, and not in a kind of they wanted it more way. Just they were just stronger physically, just more at it than Tottenham.
Yeah, I think in some ways, playing Spurs, although it is a derby, but Barry's just kind of said it didn't feel like one. Coming up against a team like Tottenham after the week they'd had was one of the ideal opponents, because Arsenal are a physical side. Tottenham aren't going to give you that, and the midfielders mentioned at the start of this podcast. And last season, I felt like the fullbacks would come in and make a midfield. This season, Philippe's right. It's a one-man midfield. The fullbacks don't ever seem to be in midfield, and it's so easy to play through. But that, I guess, now this season is Arsenal's strength. It is the physical aspect. The two centre backs. I mean, Gabriel and Saliba. Gabriel obviously acting as more of the aggressor, and Saliba plays with a bit more nuance. I don't know what the opposite of an aggressor is, but he's the one who sits back and jockeys a little bit more. It's quite an old-fashioned centre-back pairing, with one being the one who goes and contests the duels and the other one back off. But they're just so good and so crucial to what Arsenal do, even coming forward. And every time they get a corner, you just fancy him to score or be involved as well. So I actually think Spurs were kind of the ideal opposition for Arsenal after the week they'd had.
Yeah, and he's so tactically astute. Both of them are actually, Gabriel and Saliba. They're just always in the right place. Neil, I did like this question saying, has the game gone when Gabriel punches the air and stokes up the home fans after shepherding the ball out for a goal kick? Yeah.
Oh no, but that was shepherding of the highest order.
Oh,
Come on.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm trying to think of a famous shepherd that I could say, X would be proud of that. I don't have any in my locker. Who is the most?
Ben Shepherd.
Ben Shepherd. Bo Peep. Bo Peep would be proud of that. Joe says, should VAR look at corner awarding for mistakes if the corner results in a goal? I mean, we talked about this actually, Dan, with Villa's goal against West Ham in the Cup, where you were the beneficiaries. I do find it infuriating that VAR doesn't get involved in obvious things that can be cleared up quickly, and does get involved in really complicated things that can't. But at the same time, I'm not sure we'd need it.
I looked back at it last night and thought, they go back and look at kind of every finer detail in the box that happens after the corner's been awarded, and there's quite some quite complex stuff that goes on there with all the shirt pulling and all the jostling that goes on from a corner. So I think if they do score a goal, I don't know what would stop them just going back and looking whether it should have been a corner in the first place. I don't think it's that difficult, and it is it's a big thing, isn't it? A goal has been scored off the back of something that shouldn't have happened. So if you've got VAR, obviously the Villa game on Friday, there wasn't VAR, which I was really pleased about. But if it's there, why wouldn't you go back and look whether it should be a corner? It's not that difficult.
The thing is that I think getting VAR involved in that would yet again, I mean that because the phase of play has stopped when the corner is awarded. And if you have to go back and create even more stoppages for looking at this, looking at that, sometimes the decision is quite difficult to tell because the touch will be very fine, very late. Has it gone past the line completely, and so forth? There are areas. So the idea of adding more stoppages to the game is something we cannot possibly countenance.
Although it does take like 25 minutes for Declan Rice to trot over to take the corner. So
yeah,
and it takes 1 minute for David Raya to kick the ball as well. In the added time was absolutely fantastic. But I think that there is a case to look at the situation with the corner kicks, or even actually the ball going into touch. The technology is there to look at what cricket is doing with no balls. The technology is there. If you can establish within a fraction of a second or a few seconds whether the ball, for example, has passed the line to award a goal, why can't you do that for the other lines of the... I don't quite understand, apart from the expense, of course. Technologically, it's possible, but yes, it could be expensive. That would work, but to have VAR taking care of yet another aspect of the game, my goodness, please, Max, please, no, we can't have that.
I think VAR probably should get involved, but it should get involved before the corner is taken. And like you say, there is plenty of time to do it before the corner is taken. Because if it's done after the corner is taken, what happens if the defending team break up field and score? We're into the Wilson paradox territory here. But the fact of the matter is the corner was awarded. So whether it was justly or unjustly, you got to defend it. And Tottenham were unable to do so.
Yeah, I mean, look, with all the caveats, Baz, and injuries, they are agonising to watch as a fan sometimes. You know, it just felt like, you know, poor Jed Spence and Archie Gray just passing it between each other, going further back towards the corner flag. No options available, just conceding possession, a throw or a corner. 5 points from a possible 27. Level on points with Palace, behind West Ham. Even Manchester United could go ahead of them with a win tonight. What are your thoughts on the status of Tottenham, Baz?
Mine? I find them interesting. I mean, they're clearly not playing well. I think they're in the bottom 3 in the form table since, I don't know, the last couple of months. They've lost 12 games this season. That's not good enough. And for all that, I quite enjoy watching them play, and I like Ange. I would be very surprised if they are not actively looking for a replacement. I suspect there would be talks with Andoni Iraola. Whether he would be interested in going there or not is another matter. But I don't think there's any point in sacking Ange unless you got a concrete plan of who to replace him with. And Mark Langdon has recently, said there is a lot of blame to go around at Spurs, starting with recruitment and the manner in which the club is run. So it's not all Ange's fault, but his results are not sustainable. I think we're entering into the realms of potential voice note territory for you.
Yeah, two things about Ange. First of all, I've seen that he's the changes he made at the polls were considered to be naive and self-defeating, right? I've read that absolutely everywhere, I think. What I see is that the scoreline was already established at halftime. Arsenal didn't score afterwards. It's not because Ange actually substituted, some very bold substitutions. And actually, when Porro hit the post, I was wondering what is going to be the narrative of that game.
Yeah.
If suddenly Ange has decided to do without a midfield completely, usually it's a one man. Now we do it completely, and they had equalised in the last second. That's the first thing. And the second thing, and because I think we all got a soft spot for him, because he's obviously a tremendous human being, is the fact that I don't know that many managers would be able to cope with the injury situation he's had. And I know it's always looked on as being an easy excuse, but the problem is that most of the injuries he's had have always all been in the same compartment of the team, which is the defence. And since the beginning of the team, he's had to put 10 different back five pairings. 10 in the league, just in the league. That's absolutely insane. And you would expect them to struggle. The problem, though, is they're struggling so much that there's one point where the players are going to start looking at each other and thinking, you know what, we're in real trouble here. We don't see a way out of it. And that is a very, very dangerous spiral to fall into.
I mean, that Pedro Porro shot in added time that hit the post, nearly went in. Johnny Liu wrote a good piece asking, if that goes in, does that mean Spurs aren't as bad as they are? Does it mean Arsenal aren't as good as they are? And that these are the very fine margins on which Tottenham will be judged. But it didn't go in. They lost.
It didn't.
So it wasn't a corner. It was a corner, and it didn't go in. Okay.
I just wanted to say to Max, obviously, as the Spurs man here today, Spurs have won one game in 9, and I think the only team in that time who've picked up less points than them is Southampton. Like, injuries or not, is that really acceptable, especially when you look at the league table?
No, I agree with that. here's what I think. I want to see this play out, right? Now, it's important to stress that I am not dyed-in-the-wool Tottenham, right? I'm Cambridge, right? And they're the team, they are in the relegation zone League One. And, they play more in my mind than Tottenham. I love Tottenham, and it's a relationship with my dad. But it doesn't break me if they lose a football match. But I still really want them to win. I was really annoyed when they were just like trying to play out and it was shit yesterday. I was in a cafe going, oh, for fuck's sake. But I want it to play out because I'm intrigued to see this. I'm intrigued to see as the glimpses you've seen from Angie's football when everyone is there and they are good, are so good and so much better than what came before, that I'm more intrigued to see what this is like in a season or two than if Iraola or Marco Silva or someone else has a go. 2.5 decades suggest that the manager won't change. That won't make a difference. So, worst case scenario, Spurs are sort of a bit meh for the next 2.5 years. Well, that's okay. like we're all used to that. Like that. I'll be okay with that. Obviously, Liverpool away in the Carabao Cup is massive. I don't think anyone sensible would suggest they've got a good chance of getting through there. But you don't know. The Europa League is possible if they get their players back. But I don't disagree with any of you that, yeah, these results, even Ange said it, this form is terrible. It's bleakly bad. Joseph says, was Porro unlucky not to get man of the match after recovering from one of the greatest sit-down moments in Premier League history? That would have physically and mentally broken me. It almost physically broke him. I thought he'd done his ACL. When was it Trossard, Philippe, who just did him? Oh, it was some turn, wasn't it?
I don't want to watch it again. I don't even want to talk about it again. It was horrible.
It's so humiliating, wasn't it? Back to Arsenal. They're clearly in the title race. I don't think they have as much chance as Liverpool, Philippe, but they do have a grit about them. And I know we're so results driven, and when they don't deliver against United or Man United or Newcastle, you say, well, look, they're missing something. But their defensive strength means that if Liverpool do go through a blip, they can grind these results out.
You look at David Raya is one of the best keepers in the Premier League. I don't think anybody has any doubt about that. The central defending pairing is fabulous. Lewis Kelly is one of the finds of the season. When he was cautioned and went off the pitch, by the way, it was one of the great moments of the game because he was hilarious. He was so happy about everything. And you carry on looking like that. Declan Rice had a very fine game too. Martin Odegaard is not very far from his best. The problem is that up front, there are no real solutions. The number of times when the Arsenal were in a promising situation and you had two players who were in the similar zone and not quite knowing where to position themselves. And Kai Havertz, for all his talent, which is immense, and is not in a great form at the moment. Gabriel Jesus is injured. There are no Bukayo Saka is injured. When he is injured, there are no solutions. The number of situations. I think what creates the impression that Arsenal are creating loads of chances, and there are loads of situations in which there should be a big chance, but there isn't quite, because there is an air shot, because there are two players where there should be one, because there's no good run, because that superb cross or cross ball, there's nobody to meet it. So yes, they do need somebody up front. The defense is great, but compare the resources that Arsenal has got going forward to those of Liverpool. We'd have Diogo Jota right now. Actually, we will have him yesterday. So, and Jota struggles to get game time. We'd love to have Darwin Núñez even, So
yeah.
It's so. There is an unbalance here, and it's strange. It's a team that not everybody seems to be at the same level at the moment. Some players are performing extremely well, others are a little bit underwhelming, to be honest.
All right, that'll do for part one. Part two, we'll begin with Newcastle's victory over Wolves. Welcome to part two of the Guardian Football Weekly. Ryan says, why is no one taking Newcastle's treble credentials seriously? 9 straight wins, Baz, for Newcastle. And, Wolves had the odd chance in this game, but, Isak and Gordon are just so good.
I would say Wolves had a lot of chances. It was a funny old game, and I think the scoreline flatters Newcastle a bit. They were well worth the win, but Wolves had more shots on target with them. They also hit the post twice, at least. Strand Larson, I think, and those don't count as shots on target, as we have discussed with Troy Townsend in the past, ad nauseum. But you can't, are Newcastle in the title race? We keep asking, can Arsenal go on a run? Can Man City go on a run? Well, Newcastle are on a run. They've won 9 in a row. They've won, I think, 7 of those in the league since their last defeat against Brentford. They've gone from 12th in the table to 4th, scored 26, conceded 3. Martin Dubravka's come in for Nick Pope and is playing really well, keeping loads of clean sheets. Alexander Isak is probably the best striker, certainly in Europe at the moment. Can't put a foot wrong. And he's got everything in his locker. Anthony Gordon up in supports, playing really well. So it speaks volumes for how well Newcastle are doing at the moment, that they were quite a way off their best, I think, yesterday, and still won 3-0.
I mean, Dubravka did make an excellent save late on. Even better considering I think we'd sold him to the Saudi League about 2 weeks ago and were convinced that he'd played his last game. I think
he was also convinced because he did a farewell at Newcastle's last away game, a quite emotional farewell. And so last night it was like, I left my keys behind.
17 goals for the season for Isak. He's on 46 in total in the Premier League, third all time for Newcastle, one behind Callum Wilson. Has a few more to get to Alan Shearer. The conversation always goes down straight to, like, who's going to buy him? And I understand why that is infuriating for Newcastle fans, but there's a pecking order in football, and if Real Madrid want him, they do. But at the moment, he is at Newcastle, and he is just a perfect number 9 to have for them.
Yeah, I said a couple of seasons ago when they were on the cusp of finishing in the top 4 and getting Champions League football that Newcastle had accelerated themselves so much that teams like Arsenal, for example, can't just come and take Newcastle's players. It's very, very difficult. And then they had a bit of an off year last year, and maybe Isak could have gone in the summer. There was murmurs that he was touted round to Chelsea. I think we're now getting back to the territory where Newcastle are looking like they may well be a Champions League team again. And I don't think, I think if they qualify for the Champions League, I don't think Arsenal or a team of that ilk can just come and take Isak from Newcastle. He was a fantastic bit of business. He was such a good centre forward. In the first kind of year and a half, it felt like him and Callum Wilson were sharing the load. When the other one was fit, he would only pick one of them and they would rotate a little bit. At this point now, he's the undisputed number 9 of Newcastle. And at the moment, he is the best forward in the Premier League, if not Europe. 8 games in a row he scored in. And if you look at their next 3 fixtures, they've got Bournemouth at home, Southampton away, where he could probably not play and still score, and then Fulham at home. Like, he has every chance of at least levelling that Jamie Vardy record. And then if he does, he can sell the rights to a film that never gets released once he gets those 11 in a row.
And also the midfield, Philippe, and this move, Tonali moving back a bit, and it's just the balance of it is just, it's just really interesting how much that has changed their fortunes.
And it's also a very physical midfield. My goodness. They're big units, all of them, but also extremely good technically. I think perhaps what the only question mark you would have about Newcastle at the moment is the fact that the team that is on the pitch is very much the first team. That's it. And you wonder whether the backup is quite as good as what we're seeing at the moment. But they've hit one of those moments. Even if, honestly, I was perhaps a little bit underwhelmed by their defensive performance yesterday. They conceded an awful lot of chances, as Barry said. But, they also can concentrate on the league, really. They're in a magnificent position. Alexander Isak, by the way, you will have noticed, wears the sacred number on his shirt, which is 14, which is Thierry Henry's jersey number. And he actually makes me think a bit about Henry, the way he plays, when he sort of goes to the left-hand side and looks for space and then cuts inside. But yes, they are very well balanced. I don't think as defensively sound as an Arsenal is, but going forward, my goodness, the importance of relationships, when you see how Alexander and Isak and Gordon combine together, the way they find each other, the way they seem to know instinctively, It's not instinct, it's repetition, it's intelligence. Where they are and how to combat with each other. Very few teams have that. So, yeah, pretty damn serious, isn't it?
Yeah, I thought Guimaraes as well did so brilliantly to set up.
Well, yeah.
I think the second one. Everton 0, Villa 1. Dan, you would have been paying more attention to this game than anyone else. Didn't look like a classic. Even afterwards, David Moyes said it wasn't a classic. But you did enough. You spoiled his renaissance.
Yeah, Villa actually in some ways made the game easier than it could have been, but then also more difficult than it should have been in different ways. Before the game, I've got to admit, I was worried. Villa's away form was pitiful going into the game. They'd lost 5 in a row, and it felt like the worst time to play Everton probably in 5-6 years with Moyes coming back at Goodison Park. But
it's a low bar.
It is a low bar. And then the camera panned to the Everton fans after 6 minutes. And to be honest, nothing had really happened in the 6 minutes. Everyone looked bedraggled and beleaguered, and I thought we're 6 minutes into one of your heroes returning to manage the club, and everybody just looks miserable. But both teams had chances in that first half. Villa probably had the better two. Kamara cleared one off the line for Everton. Ramsey absolutely should have scored on half-time, and Watkins probably before that. And then just one moment of really precise and intricate football, that the weight of pass from Rodgers through to Watkins, who badly needed a goal and finished it on his wrong side. I'm really pleased for him, because even when he's not scoring, he just puts in so much for the team. He never hides. He's always showing. And Villa have got a little bit of a problem at the moment with the discourse around Watkins and Duran. It's a nice problem in a lot of ways, but you don't see many teams that have two strikers of that quality, and it's getting difficult to choose between them. I mean, Duran didn't even get on last night. I assume he might be getting saved to make an impact against Arsenal on Saturday, although now Watkins has scored and he's got a great record against Arsenal. He probably should start. So it's a nice problem to have, but in some ways it's not doing Villa any favours, because at some point one of them's going to want to play every week.
Everton clearly the bigger story from this game. He did get a lovely reception, David Moyes. That might be the extent of the new manager bounce. I mean, they did look so. They are a tough watch, Baz, aren't they?
Yeah, I would not like to have to watch them week in, week out. That's the 9th time they've failed to score in 11 league games. They have 3 strikers, none of whom are any good. Broja, I think, is out injured now for a while. Beto isn't much good, and Dominic Calvert-Lewin is just a disaster at this stage. He had one good season 4 years ago, and he's more or less been dining out on it ever since, because he doesn't score goals, he doesn't provide assists. He missed 3 good chances last night, one excellent chance to snatch a point for Everton right at the end, and sent his shot sailing over the bar from 6 yards, like kind of shinned it. And I think that there's talk bigger clubs are interested in him this window, and I've no idea why, because he's a striker who doesn't score goals or provide assists. So what does he do?
I mean, there's one player they've got to try and hang on, by all means, Everton, and it's Iliman Ndiaye, who is an absolute gem of a footballer, and you wonder what he's doing in that team. And in fact, that gloomy Goodison, gloomy as the light, the mood, everything, only lit up when the little boy was on the ball. And he's brave, he's talented, he's got an eye for goal. And I'm absolutely sure there's loads of people who are circling around him. And given the Everton's financial situation, which is not absolutely brilliant, I do hope they hang on to him, because he's one of their very, very few hopes. Because the way it's going, remind me of what the table looks like and who they're playing next, Everton.
Well, next up, they've Spurs at home, Brighton away, Leicester at home, Bournemouth and Liverpool at home.
They'll be all right next game then.
Yeah, I was going to say, God, crisis alert, Everton, Spurs. But yeah, they're on 17 points, 16th position. There is a real gap above them. Man United are 6 points ahead of them. So we presume it's these 5 at the moment who are in the relegation dogfight. They're on 17, Ipswich 16, Wolves 16, Leicester 14, Southampton 6. Everton and Ipswich have a game in hand over Wolves and Leicester. So, yeah, they are, but they are by no means, they are in a bad position. And you're right, that game against Tottenham on Sunday is enormous.
Just on Enjoy, surely he's wasted out wide. You're playing Decore as a number 10. Enjoy can almost get lost out wide. You've got to get him into the middle of the park. I agree with Philippe. He's a magnificent player. I watched him live at Villa Park in September, I think it was, or August when they came to Villa Park, and he was the best player on the pitch, and he was very good again last night, and has been good every time I've watched Everton. But if you're not scoring goals and you're not really making loads of chances, get your most creative player into the number 10 position. It's bizarre to me that he's been playing out wide for the majority of the season.
Do you think he's just wandering around going, what am I doing here? Everyone's rubbish. Like, like they're just trying to do no one can do keepy ups. He's like, just like, they're all just like John, like Peter Kay in the John Smith's advert, just booting the ball out. And he's just like, just want to control a football, lads. Dan says, do the panel have an opinion about Piegate, or do they need an in-depth explainer about it from Dan Bardell? What is it? Is it worthy of time on this podcast? Doesn't sound like
no. I would suggest the Guardian audience is more mature than Piegate that happened at Villa on Friday. It's so stupid, so stupid.
I have to say, my curiosity is piqued.
Ditto.
There's I'm very good friends with him. There's a vlogger, a Villa vlogger. His videos are unbelievable. He goes home and away, covers Villa everywhere. Max Stokes channels called Villa on Tour. And he had the audacity, because he films his match experience every single game. He had the audacity on Friday to video himself trying his £1.50 pie, because a lot of things were £1.50 for Villa's 150th anniversary. I think it was chicken and something, and it was freezing cold. And he had the audacity to clip this up and put it on social media, and got absolutely annihilated because people are like, well, why are you videoing it? Why didn't you just take it back, even though the queues were absolutely atrocious on Friday? And now Villa fans on X are just obsessed with pies and having a pop that he should have just sent it back rather than filming it. But the whole idea of a vlog is that you film your matchday experience, and that forms part of his experience. And I would fully expect everything I've just said not to make it into the show.
No. I think it'll stay in. I think it's interesting, and I suspect we get a lot of correspondence about cold food. And it's not like you're sitting in a restaurant, right?
No,
it's hassle. You get your pie, you get back to your seat, and you're there. To then suddenly go, you can't just go, "Excuse me, sir," garçon. This pie.
If he'd have tried to take it back, like, he's quite very well known about Villa fans. His YouTube channel is very good, and he does very well off it. If he'd have tried to take that pie back, people, and jumped the queue to take the pie back, everyone would have gone, "Well, who on earth does this guy think he is?" You cannot win.
That's in fact the second Piegate in the history of English football, isn't it? Because there was Piegate.
Oh yes,
when
the gambling
coach,
their sub goalkeeper.
Wayne Shaw. Yeah, gambling pie.
I suspect it's not the first. I suspect there's been more than 2 Piegates in the history of English football.
Well, I have a vague recollection of Millwall getting fined because someone threw a pie from the stand which hit a player. And I think Millwall's argument, or their fans' argument anyway, was, this is not a missile, it's a savoury snack. It doesn't count. It's not the same as a lighter or a coin.
Villa have a weird relationship with food as well, because someone obviously threw a cabbage at Steve Bruce
That's
at one
true.
point as
and
well.
Actually, that is a missile, because if you've ever been hit by a cabbage,
have you ever been hit by one?
Nothing will ever beat Luis Figo's pigs.
Well, of course, nothing will beat the pig head. No, but I was filming a bit about the cabbage, and I said, "Well, look, why didn't you at the end of the shot just throw a cabbage at my head, and I'll sit still, and it will hit me." And actually, they threw it just to see what it was like, and it was like, don't throw cabbages at people. Leicester 0, Crystal Palace 2. What did you make of this one, Baz?
Not a huge amount, really. 6 defeats in a row for Leicester, entirely expected. I think when Southampton got their new manager, there was a clip going around of the Southampton new manager bounce, and it was basically someone dropping a watermelon off a high balcony onto concrete, and it just splattered all over the floor. Leicester have had a kind of similar bounce with Ruud van Nistelrooy. They had chances. Jamie Vardy missed a couple you'd expect him to put away in his sleep, and then had a couple other half chances. They hit the bar through Soumare, but it was a pretty straightforward win for Crystal Palace, who again, were nowhere near their best, but still ran out fairly comfortable winners.
Nice finish from Mark Gay in there as well. I think Palace fans slightly frustrated that Trevor Chalobah's been called back by Chelsea and wasn't treated particularly well by Chelsea when he was at Chelsea. So, things change very quickly, I guess. I'm sure he will, do his best when he's back there. But frustrating for Palace fans. That couple of games this evening: Man United, Southampton, Ipswich, Brighton. Then the games this weekend. Arsenal Villa is interesting because it was the game that Arsenal lost last season, which sort of put them out of the title race. Liverpool go to Brentford and their excellent home record, and Forest have an on-paper victory against Southampton. So Forest have the easiest game of the top three, don't they? Newcastle and the chasing back home to Bournemouth. That's the early kickoff on Saturday. As we've said already, Everton Spurs is crisis klaxon central there at Goodison on Sunday. Not sure if this is two football cliches, but some feedback on yesterday's pod from Adam. Presumably not that one. I mean, he's busy enough working on football cliches to listen to other football podcasts to check if their cliches are correct. Who suggested that we got the order wrong when we were describing Liverpool's potential blip, having not picked up a win in their last two games, suggesting a wobble comes before a blip. Wobble 1 to 2 games, blip 3 to 4, crisis anything beyond that. Barry, any thoughts on that? Would you go wobble before blip?
Yeah, he's probably right, is Adam. I'm happy to accept that.
Yeah, okay. Any other further thoughts, or Philippe, you're considering it?
No. I think it's very interesting. I mean, I think it's obviously it's not a theory that is to be constructed in absolute terms, because the blip for Liverpool is not a blip for Southampton, and so therefore. But I think that's wobble, blip, crisis. I think there must be an intermediate stage between blip and crisis, but I can't quite put my finger.
Or there's sort of there's a sort of doldrums, isn't there, which doesn't quite fit within this. But yes, maybe we will get sued by Adam Hurrey for this section.
I think doldrums, because doldrums is the absence of wind. So doldrums comes before wobble.
Oh, no.
Okay, really?
Yeah, I think it does.
No, I'm not sure. No, I don't think so.
When you're in the doldrums, it means you're making no progress because
I think maybe I was wrong to introduce doldrums. Doldrums is a separate thing on a different side.
Doldrums feels like something you talk about the entire project, the Spurs project at the moment is in the doldrums rather than match to match. It's the whole thing. Doldrums feels like to me.
Producer Joel suggests maybe a looming crisis comes before a crisis. You're absolutely right. Plenty of looms at Goodison on Sunday. Anyway, that'll do for part 2. We will talk about the regulator and whether it'll ever get through Parliament with Niall Cooper, the CEO of something called Fair Game, in just a second. Welcome to part 3 of the Guardian Football Weekly. Right, so let's talk about the regulator and whether it'll get through Parliament. Niall Cooper is the CEO of Fair Game. Can you tell us about Fair Game? Like what it is, like who are, for listeners who don't know, who the hell are you, Niall? Tell us.
I love that. Who are you? I feel like the football chant is already echoing down the terraces. Fair Game, we're a group of 34 football clubs that came together largely because we're a bit hacked off with the way football governance works. It all began because I looked into the board of the Dons Trust, and I was given the wonderful remit of ethos, lovely broad thing. And I kind of went out and said, right, well, what's wrong with the game? And everybody came back from saying football governance. I used to be a football journalist. I was asking journalists, I was asking people in the boardroom, asking other clubs and so on. And it came really clear that certain clubs just weren't being listened to, the ones who were trying to do things the right way. And, that's what we were trying to sort out. So that's how we've grown, now representing 34 clubs, lobbying as well as much as we can do to try and get the game in a better state than it is or has been for ages, to be honest.
So 34 clubs, and that's sort of mainly lower league and non-league clubs. Why don't all clubs support this?
But you know what? I'm married to a Scot, so the best way to describe this is a fantastic Scottish phrase, which is that there are some clubs out there that are a little bit like numpties. So that's the reason. So not everybody thinks about holistically about what is beneficial for the whole of the game. So you'll have certain clubs that are very much involved in the self-interest, and there are other clubs that perhaps don't want to see what's underneath the bonnet. And that's kind of where we've got to. That said, there are some clubs who have said to me, look, we can be rivals for 180 minutes a season, but ultimately we need to look at getting a healthy football system, which is going to benefit all of us. At the moment, the financial flows are a right mess. You've got clubs that overspend routinely. We all know about what's happening in the Championship, where most clubs spend more on players' wages than they do get in revenue. We've seen the gaps between the divisions come out of control. Parachute payments have made the Championship, and the competitive balance there has completely disappeared. And you've seen clubs raising ticket prices, cutting women's teams, cutting back on infrastructure in their clubs, and so on. There's just so many things that are wrong with the game that basically need fixing, and that's kind of where we've come into.
Let's talk about the bill then. Paul McInnes writing in The Guardian that a remarkable 375 amendments have been proposed, addressing everything from state ownership of clubs to replacing the use of the word crest with badge to, quote, avoid the incorrect use of heraldic terms, which feels important to me. From the outside, it feels to me like this is just, this will never get through. There's just too many people there trying to stop it getting through. What's your feeling?
Do you know what? I'm obviously on the side of the optimist on this one. No surprise, really. If I simplified the bill down to kind of three key different changes, right? One is the financial flow. So the financial flow is a distribution that happens every few years. So that's already kind of in existence. And what you're looking at is just setting a few parameters to make it fairer, which isn't like a big thing. You're basically saying, right, EFL, Premier League, you've got to match these things to sort out football's finances. Another one is the code of governance, which a governance code exists in basically every other sport that exists, and a lot of those kind of standards are already out there, so like equality standards and stuff like that. So that brings it all into one place, which will be connected with the licensing regime, basically what happens in nearly every other sport. So that's, again, no real big issue. And the last one is the State of the Game report, which is basically an independent analysis of where football is at. And again, the EFL, the Premier League, already require clubs to report back on a lot of these things anyway. And you bring those into one place and you give that into an independent body that then looks at, right, well, what are the fundamental issues of the game? So it's not like all these kind of huge bits and bobs and you whatever. What it's doing is trying to make sure that you've got somebody with holistic oversight that can independently look at how we make the game better and make sure we don't have all those clubs going bust, the 64 that have gone into administration since the start of the Premier League, that 58% of technically insolvent clubs, those huge financial gaps that are causing clubs to cut back on infrastructure and fan engagement and academies and women's teams and raise ticket prices is what we're seeing routinely at the moment. All of those sort of things are addressed and looked at to try and make the game more sustainable. So that's where it's at. It's not like a huge, big, scary thing. It's three things that are basically bringing together elements that aren't there at the moment. And I think that's the beauty of it. And I think, you only have to talk to all those clubs that have gone into crisis, and most clubs have got a history of remembering when it's gone into crisis to look at how you solve it. And I think that's the big advantage of what we're looking at.
Do you think fans realise the importance of it?
Not as many as they should do, or whatever that's going to happen. I think when you look at it, and we talk to a lot of fans and a lot of clubs routinely, and you'll find that the fans who are ones clubs that have got recent experience of their club being in crisis get it and really get it, because that's a lot of hurt and a lot of pain. And, when a club goes into administration, you're basically talking local businesses going out, going bust, because that's basically what happens. They're all dependent. It's like a supply chain, and they go bust. So there's a lot of people out there that get it from those crisis clubs. Some of those clubs who've lived in, immune to it are perhaps less aware of what the benefit it is. But I think certainly fans in the Championship will be aware of the competitive imbalance that exists there because of parachute payments. And then actually one of the other biggest gaps is between the Championship and League One. And, League One clubs are basically, they're not even in the conversation half the time, or League Two clubs. So it's bringing those into saying, well, actually, there's huge wealth at the top end of the game, and yet you're struggling to, pay for your program sellers. That's where you're at. So there's a huge difference that can really be addressed that benefits the whole of the football pyramid.
The Premier League don't really want the regulator. I don't know how many Premier League clubs want the regulator. how can the rest of football compete with, them?
So, I mean, I think the thing is that when you think about the European Super League and what the backlash was from that, and it was the fans that led that. Now, the Premier League is a fantastic organisation of doing exactly what the Premier League is set up to do, which is to benefit its stakeholders, and its stakeholders are 20 billionaires. So, yeah, wonderful job at looking after them. And it's perhaps no surprise when you talk about the £3.2 billion broadcast, revenues that come into football through broadcast and media rights, that 88% of that stays with the Premier League. And of the 12% that's left over, 7% of that goes to the parachute payment clubs, those 6 clubs that get rewarded for getting relegated every couple of years. So that leaves 5% for the next 138 clubs. So, that's where the Premier League's at. It's got a fantastic monopoly in how football's finances operate. So, yeah, of course, the Premier League are not going to be massively keen on it. But then again, think about, why is the pyramid so important? The pyramid is so important because it creates a pool of talent. It creates a love of the game in a community bit that doesn't necessarily exist as much. Community spending is absolutely key to lower league clubs, and that really strengthens the whole love of the game and the fact that we all love it. I mean, a lot of people now will have what I would call a brand club, a club that might be in the Premier League, and their local community club that they really want to be and feel involved in. It's that local community club that gives a lot of people the real deep love of the game.
No, the impression I get, and I'm far from an expert on this, is that quite a few Tory peers are trying to either water down the regulator or kick it into the long grass or just get rid of it altogether. Among them, Colin Moynihan, who's a former sports minister, and Karen Brady, who's obviously CEO at West Ham. So will they succeed in doing that?
I think they're raising points. I mean, do you know, I mean, I was there watching them again last night, and I will hold my tongue on what I particularly thought of them at the time. And I was with representatives of other supporters trusts and football clubs last night. I think we had Southend and Luton and Wimbledon were there, Ebbsfleet United and a couple of other clubs as well, all watching this all unfold. I don't think they will succeed because I think they're out of touch with the majority of football, the majority of the football pyramid. Ultimately, most people in the chamber do want a better game, do want a regulator that works and is efficient. And what we need to think about is that this isn't called the Premier League governance bill, it's called the football governance bill. And that means it has to look at how the whole of the pyramid works and how the whole of the pyramid can thrive going forward. And what we need to think about is the strength and power of our game rests in clubs, not just Man Uniteds and the Liverpools and the Arsenals, but it also is on the Southend Uniteds, the Tunbridge Angels, the Ebbsfleet Uniteds, the Grimsby Towns, the Newport Counties, the Lincoln Cities, and clubs like that are absolutely fundamental to the game. And I think we need to make sure that they are at the heart of this conversation as well.
Yeah, Niall, I wish I shared your optimism, because I think in some way the merit of the arguments, and you're making the arguments very well, and it's very convincing, and I think we're all, all in agreement with you. But it's not about the good at football. It's a political quarrel. It's called filibustering. When you put down 375 amendments, it's because you don't want the legislation to go through. And it doesn't matter if the legislation has merits. It doesn't matter if the regulator is something that actually was an idea that the Conservatives were very keen on that long ago, by the way. And suddenly they're not in favour of it anymore. It's a political football, so to speak, and the Tories don't want it. Is there anything we can do about that? Because we have this extraordinary situation that at the moment people are already being interviewed to be and shortlisted to be at the head of the regulator. And we might not have a regulator for 10 years. And then the other lobbies will come in. You will have the gambling lobby will come in, which is very powerful in the Commons. I'm sorry, I'm being the devil's advocate here, but that's exactly what I want to be, the devil's advocate, because how can you go past all this filibustering in the House of Lords and then the ping pong match we're going to have, House of Lords, House of Commons, House of Commons, House of Lords, and so forth, before it becomes a bill, an act?
Largely because I'd say over the last 2-3 years, I've basically, I think, by osmosis, passed lobbying and political shenanigans 101 and probably got a doctorate in it now, considering the amount of meetings and knowledge I've learned of it all. Where we're at on the filibustering side, I mean, a lot of the amendments, I have to be honest, fair game sourced, because there were bits that we were like unhappy with and we wanted tweaks. The filibustering has been noticeable because you've had Tory peers standing up and you have a limit on the amount you're allowed to talk, and they've basically gone to their limit of 10 minutes. And it's been on one particular session where I was looking down on the chambers, and you had this childish schoolboy antics of people passing notes to say, right, here's some extra bits you can just waffle about, and then people patting others on the back going, oh, look, well done for reaching your 10-minute limit of talking nonsense. So there is an element of it. The reality, though, is that the House of Lords does have a time limit, and last night their bit of filibustering and debating ended. So we're now into a situation where we'll go into the Commons, we'll go to report stage and into the Commons. And looking at that timetable, I think we're still on course for, it's going to be a bit tighter than we want it to be, for the regulator to be in place for the start of the next season. The shadow regulator is already making some conversation. So I'm optimistic about it being in place. The key really is to make sure that it has sufficient powers and that it is doing all the things it needs to do. I'm optimistic. We started out with having 20 amendments, and we're at this moment in time quite confident that 16 of them are in a good place, and the 4 others are connected with fan veto, a bit on human rights, and obviously that financial flow.
No, thanks so much for coming on. Let's keep in touch as this journey continues.
Yeah, no problem at all. It's wonderful to speak to you all, and I'm happy to come back to you and impart my kind of instant reaction from having sat in a gallery looking down on a load of people deciding the future of our national game. So it's a joyous experience. I think I'm happy to have taken that mantle on, and look forward to speaking to you guys all again really soon.
Yes, you do it, so we don't have to. Thank you, Niall. Niall Cooper there from Fair Game. If you are interested, you can go to their website, fairgameuk.org. Briefly, any other business? Joe says, while I love Get Shorty, now one of the best Elmore Leonard adaptations along with Jackie Brown, there is no way that Cole Palmer has seen this movie. It was released 7 years before he was born. I respect Barry's Chili Palmer reference, but surely the goal celebration is a play on Cold Palmer as an ice-cold assassin or some such, says Joe. Nish Kumar messaged me, Barry, hey Nish, I was shouting, Get Shorty, Be Cool is the sequel at my phone, so thrilled the correction was made. Further digging by producer Joel revealed that another celebrity listener, Chris O'Dowd, was in the Get Shorty TV spin-off in 2017.
Yes, he was. Yes.
Which passed me by. I'm sorry, Chris. If you know of any other connections between Football Weekly and the extended Chili Palmer universe, please get in touch. footballweekly@theguardian.com. That'll do for today. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Dan.
Thank you.
Thank you, Philippe.
Merci, Max.
Thanks, Baz.
Thank you.
Football Weekly is produced by Joel Grove. Our executive producer is Daniel Stevens. We'll be back on Monday.
This is The Guardian.